Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tracker, Season 1, Episode 9. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I do realize it's been I had to look this up. It's been 5 months since I reviewed the last episode, but at least I'm doing it, obviously with Season 2 right around the corner. But either way, interesting episode. Obviously, we start off very sadly where a father is looking for his daughter. She's going missing, and they they search a lake and they find a body. Luckily, it's not his daughter, but it's her friend Jamie. I think it's interesting too that it never ended up being a situation of finding Jamie's parents were never included. Stuff like that always makes me wonder, did they was that an element of the episode, but then they maybe during the writing process they're like, well, let's scrap that, or maybe during the filming process just let's not include that, because obviously Coulter is trying to understand why Lana, who is still missing, because they never found her body. I was not expecting the 3-year time skip. It was that's rough. I'm sure that's a sad not sure. You hear the stories about people who have family members out there who are missing, and it ends up being that complicated conundrum of, would you rather have answers, or is the not knowing is always an issue? But even when you get answers, the answer might not be what you want it to be. But her father has kept up hope these past 3 years, but the cops have kind of given up because they've done a lot to put resources into finding her body, and they're just under the assumption that Jamie and Lana kind of did a pact, double suicide type of situation, and they just haven't been able to find Lana's body. It has been their perspective on it, but Gavin hasn't given up hope. He believes his daughter is still alive because he's like, she wasn't depressed. He's like, I can't speak for Jamie, but my daughter, we have a good relationship, especially after her mom died. All we had was each other. If something was going on, she would have told me. And so his main reason for believing she was still alive is because there was a photo released in the newspaper 2 weeks ago or something like that, and he sees Lana in the picture. So initially the detective's reluctant, but she's not even reluctant. She's a lot more on board with Coulter than some of the previous cops. People get a little territorial. It's like, oh, who's this guy coming here thinking he knows more to me? But it's also just a situation of, for her, it's like, if you can give them some hope, if you can find something we miss, I'm all for it. Because she's also coming at it from her perspective of, this is a cold case that's stuck with her. And she's like, I can't even get coffee without, Lana's face coming to mind. So it's just that case you can't quite shake, which I think it's interesting because Coulter says, he talked about two technically. One that he couldn't shake. It's one, he was like, oh, one that was early in his career, and then he also talked about his dad. I think he was talking about those separately. I don't think those were him talking about one specific case. I think that's him talking about one case from early on in his career and his dad. So I think that's interesting. I wonder what that other case is, and maybe we'll find out about it. Maybe it has some ties to it, because his biggest mystery is finding out all the stuff about his family, is what he's trying to unearth. And the thing is, he seems to avoid the subject, but we actually don't know how much Coulter's ever spent time probably in his early years of doing this. He probably tried to look into his family situation, but never was able to get any answers out of his mom. Maybe he wasn't able to get anything on his own, and that's just always been that elusive question mark about what actually happened to dad, stuff about my family, what's being kept from me, Obviously, this whole life he's kind of kept himself secluded in that regard, and he actually ended up talking to, I looked it up, the character's name is Helen Brock. I'll just call her Detective Brock. I don't remember if they've ever actually said her name in the episode. They probably did, and I might have said it once or twice. But yeah, Detective Brock talked about the fact is she couldn't quite let this case go, and it ended up costing her marriage. And just any other cop is in the same situation of, you're just forever single, or you're on your third or fourth marriage by now type of situation. So, but anyway, getting back to the case itself, they eventually got the original photo from the photographer who took it, and they actually ran it, and it turns out it actually was Lana, because they've been dealing with Gavin's theories, what happened to his daughter, like, over and over, because, like, looking at the photo, it does seem like she's scared, and it's almost like, oh, she purposely sees the camera and looks into it, so they're like, why is she out and about, and if she is, why didn't she ever come home? So it's like someone might be like having her trapped and she's stuck and she can't come home. So we get into that more as we find out stuff later on in the episode. But this also deals with like this old abandoned mental hospital, which apparently Jamie and Lana would go to with a dude they knew, Richard, because basically they would go there, and because they were kind of into the occult, which kind of was part of selling the whole narrative of, oh, they were into some spooky, weird stuff. They were outcasts. That it's like they were into this dark stuff. So it's not too surprising that they went down the route that they did. That's why it was an easy story for a lot of people to believe. And I think even Jamie's parents too. But it could also just be like, right, they didn't want to hold on to hope like Gavin. Because for one, their hope was stricken from them. And they just, I think it was easier to like just accept things as they are rather than asking questions, because it's like even asking questions wasn't going to bring back their daughter, so they were just like, they just kind of accepted it. But Gavin, considering they never found his daughter's body, just never gave up hope. So, but either way, I thought it was interesting perspective that Coulter has on like the ghost situation, which I'm like, oh, it's a very rational way. I mean, Coulter is a very rational person, but his perspective on it is like, there's enough evil in the world. People are terrible enough that why do we need to add extra layers by adding ghosts into the world? It's like humans are monsters enough on their own. It's like, that's an interesting perspective to have, and it is interesting that he would have that perspective. You could tell he was getting a little unnerved throughout like some of this place, because it did give off a spooky vibe. Because even Detective Brock was like, yeah, there's kind of a dark energy about this place that maybe it attracts, something in people, but then like Coulter's like, or maybe these people are already, something's broken or messed up inside of them, and they're just using their delusions and latching onto the place's dark energy, not justifying but also explaining it. And it's just like they delusionally make an excuse of, oh, this place is drawing me in with its dark energy. Like, no, something inside of you was already like that. So we never actually got an answer for what happened to Richard. Basically, when they were, like the video they took like the week before Lana and Jamie disappeared, like he suddenly got like a scratch or something. So it's like, oh, maybe there's something but it's just like, oh, maybe he backed up into something like for like him to get the scratch on the side and start bleeding. So it's like, we never got an explanation for that, but we know like Snowman was watching him, and it turns out it was this homeless guy who was staying there. And he saw Lana wearing like a yellow raincoat, and someone with a black raincoat beside them. And it's not till like Detective Brock was like, okay, that's spooky, because it turns out there was a guy like 10 years ago, there was like a murder of a boy, and he was wrapped up in a yellow raincoat. And it just happened to be that Lana was wearing a yellow raincoat, but the guy who did this crime was locked up 5 years ago. Lana's been missing 3 years, so it's like he couldn't have done it. But his name's Arrow, which is so weird to see, because that actor, I just, because obviously this came out beforehand, but I most recently saw him in season 2 of Reginald the Vampire playing a very different role. So it's just kind of like, oh, this kind of weird. See, even though I would have seen this first before I saw Reginald, if I was watching everything chronological order when it came out, but either way. But yeah, he's an unnerving, like him when it's like, oh, I did this, I'm the one who committed this crime, I'm so sorry, please forgive me for what I did. And I was like, and like it kind of gave that vibe initially, like he didn't do it alone. Like either he's covering for someone or he didn't do it alone. Especially because no matter how much cops press him about some of the details of why the yellow coat and stuff like raincoat, he never gave them answers until Coulter comes to him. Because Coulter kind of presented himself vulnerability-wise. It's like, yeah, I'm dealing with a case of someone killed my father and we never got any answers for it. And that kind of made Errol a little more comfortable to be like, okay, fine, why did you use the yellow raincoat? Because it turns out his father would use that as an excuse of like, yeah, we're going to go out and I'm putting on his yellow raincoat, but he'd take me into the shed and he'd abuse me. And it's like, yeah, he did the same thing to his victim, just kind of, sadly repeating his cycle. But it's like, he's like, we, and it's like, wait, who's the we we're talking about? I was like, it does sound like another person. When he was just like, oh yeah, the demon Azeroth. It's like, okay, you're covering. And he kind of brought up, there was apparently like a box with like Vincent or something. I forgot the name. But it's like, yeah, he's covering from someone else, and the question is why. But it does seem like he probably had a partner. So the moment Coulter went to go see the sister, I was like, the moment he went to go see her, I was like, it's going to be the sister, isn't it? I was like, because we saw her in his confession video, but I was like, and it did seem almost like she was coaching him, like, yeah, it's okay. Like, she didn't look distraught. She just looked so, like, her, like, just her as if she didn't seem so distraught about it. So I was like, that's interesting. It's just like from the very, like the moment that scene started, I was like, it's definitely the sister, isn't it? Because my thing at the time was like, are they working together, or is she the perpetrator and he's just covering for her? Because I started thinking like maybe he wasn't the one that was abused, but she was. But the way he was acting about being kind of like religious now and got a Bible, like him acting the way he did kind of made it go like, no, it seems like they both were, and they both are deranged. So I love how Coulter figured it out, because the name Arrow had given him, he was like, it doesn't make any sense. And even she's like, how'd you know that name? He's like, it's an anagram for your name. I was like, oh my God. So it was like right there in front of you. But also the red string that's supposed to belong to the witch, like we see it around her keys, because it was left at the crime scene of like that abandoned hospital. So I thought that was so excellently done, because I was so, that entire time I was like, she's going to pop up while Coulter's not looking and she's going to knock him out. I was like, that's how it's going to go. It's like, well, it didn't go that way. She's not, like, she thinks she's getting away with it. I also love, like, right, the Aurora blood drive, which is where Lana was when she popped up in that photo. So I was like, okay, tying it all together in that regard. But he went sneaking around, and then she's just like, how did you figure it out? Cut off the power. Luckily, Coulter found where Lana was. She tried to tase him. I was like, oh, this could get nasty. But luckily, like, either it's just maybe the clothes he's wearing is thick enough that the shock didn't fully get him, and he's just maybe a tougher dude, so he ends up knocking her out. Well, she tried to get on top of him and choke him out, but luckily he lifted her up and banged her head on the, like, some of the wood panels of, I think, of the ceiling of the basement, and tied her up, and luckily saved Lana, and she's still okay. So we finally get answers for it later on, that basically Arrow and his sister were just naturally drawn to something about the hospital, and they just happened to come across Jamie and Richard and Lana all there, and became obsessed with them and stalked them, and well, they naturally became obsessed with that place, and then she, like, still came around and became obsessed with her. So when her brother went away, she came back. Well, because they said, like, both her and her brother got associated with that place, and then I guess, like, she just kept coming back here even after her brother got locked up and was dealing with everything, and she apparently took both of them, but then pushed Jamie into the water. I guess that's why you also chose two people, because it was her perpetuating, like, the abuse they went through. They needed someone alive to kind of, like, do, but I guess, like, maybe Jamie was too uncooperative, and it was just too much for her to deal with two people, so, or just to terrify her more. She, like, I don't know if the intention was to kill her, or maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, she's just kept Lana ever since. She ended up having to go into work at the blood drive, and that's why she had Lana with her. Lana managed to get away, but was so weakened she couldn't get far. So, so it wasn't like Lana necessarily planned that, but it's just we don't even know for sure if she did see the camera, but she did turn to it, like, looking for that purpose. So maybe she did, maybe she didn't, or maybe just it luckily all happened that it just, like, one single photo set this all in motion. Because if it wasn't for that one photo, like, no one would have ever believed Gavin when he was like, no, my daughter's still alive, believing that she was still alive. And luckily he was right, you know? obviously Detective Brock feels like she owes it to Gavin to apologize, because it's like, hey, I didn't believe you, but it's like no, like, you did what you did because of the evidence that presented itself at the time. There were missing pieces to the puzzle. All it took was like an outsider to, someone with, homeschooled, like our boy Holter, to kind of help put some of these pieces together, because they didn't realize all these connections that you would have never put together or known or thought to, because they were missing people, missing witnesses to this whole situation. So it's still sad because, still one of them died. Jamie did, but now, like, both Errol and his sister are going down for what they've done, and also luckily Gavin's got his daughter back. And was it Richard came over to check up on her too, so it's like, right, she doesn't have to, at least she's got a support team around her. And finally, like, Detective Brock is able to have this case, some closure on, hey, this case is done. So she wishes Coulter luck with his future of, like, yeah, hopefully, like, he's able to resolve everything with his family situation. And I thought it was poetic and beautiful, like, cutting the crime tape and the missing photo, taking them down, and just like, yeah, like, they don't need any, taking that down, being like, right, because there's a healing process beginning for this family, and it just feels they don't have to worry about that, him kind of taking care of it on that little thing. I think that little moment can mean so much in the long run symbolically for that family. So I just thought it was kind of a nice, sad, spooky episode, but also just kind of a nice resolution. And I feel most of these episodes have nice resolutions to them. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.